Democrats twerking or twerked? And the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. This podcast is called, Are Democrats Twerking or Are They Twerked? Have I caught you yet on what this actually is about and what this means? Again, this is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining us at this podcast. We're really happy that you are joining us. You cannot believe how bad the Democrats are behind this election cycle in the polls. They are so far behind, you can't believe it. I'm going to read that article in a second. But first up, when we said Democrats twerking, we really weren't kidding because get this, podcast listeners. In the Gateway Pundit, vote Senator Mack. Senator Mack is a Rhode Island Democrat state lawmaker. Okay. She is a state lawmaker currently, and she's trying to run for re-election and decided to twerk upside down for your vote on Twitter. So get this. Rhode Island Democrat State Senator Tiara Mack twerked upside down in a thong bikini in her latest campaign video posted to TikTok. The Democrat state lawmaker asked for votes as she twerked upside down at the beach on the 4th of July. Vote Senator Mack, the Democrat said after twerking on the sand in her TikTok video captioned, "A promised Senator thirst trap at Block Island." What does that mean? I promised Senator thirst trap at Block Island. Help me out here, Chris.
Oh,
what is a thirst trap?
Like that, like something to post on social media to get like people like interact with it, and it's like usually sexual.
Okay, sexual clickbait.
Sexual clickbait.
Okay, figures. See, it took a millennial to tell me what that means. So the state lawmaker also sponsored a bill for teaching kids queer, inclusive, pleasure-based sex ed. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Here is a state senator, sitting state senator, running for re-election, Senator Mack from Rhode Island, and she's twerking upside down in her thong, right? It's not even a bikini, it's a thong.
Hardly.
Showing pretty much everything, and because it's showing her from the back, not from the front. And in addition to that, she sponsored a bill while being a sitting state senator to teach kids queer, inclusive, and pleasure-based sex ed. And we wonder why we say that so many teachers and lawmakers are trying to groom children. And I just want to make it clear, the rank and file teachers are fantastic, right? Most teachers would look at this and say, this is ridiculous. But all it takes is for a state legislator to mandate this kind of thing. And then it becomes part of the curriculum because it's state law, which is what she's trying to do. So as expected, Tiara Mack, the state senator from Rhode Island, received major backlash from her vulgar TikTok video. Quote, "Say what you will about Republicans and Democrats supporting this content or not, this will simply not get you elected," one TikTok user commented. Quote, "I don't ever want to hear you complain about women aren't respected in this country after posting this," another said. Well, that's actually a really good point. Tiara Mack fired off a tweet defending her TikTok video and blamed prudish conservatives for the backlash, even though many Democrats disapproved as well. Quote, "Damn, twerking upside down really makes the conservative unhinged internet accounts pop off on Monday," Mack said. So that's what she tweeted. "Damn, twerking upside down really makes the conservative unhinged internet accounts pop off on a Monday." I mean, she can't even write proper English, so it's no wonder she's an idiot. I'm not a conservative and I'm disappointed. Where do we draw the line on the behavior of public figures? I like when we have a standard of decorum that when we want our people to rise to be uncommon, to be admired, this ain't it, a leftist said on Twitter. So even the left is abandoning her. Tiara Mack replied, "Girl, I have an Ivy League degree and am a state senator. Hate to break it to you, Their decorum isn't for us. They can't respect us in a system designed to oppress us. Jeez. Would you look her up, Tierra Mack, M-A-C-K, and find out, did she actually go to an Ivy League? So again, Tierra Mack replied, girl, I have an Ivy League degree and am a state senator. Hate to break it to you, their decorum isn't for us. They can't respect us in a system designed to oppress us. Now think about how stupid that is, ladies and gentlemen, because you got Tierra Mack, a state senator from Rhode Island.
Brown.
She went to Brown?
Mm-hmm.
Brown University. She went to Brown University, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you know what? Before we continue on this, let's play the clip, okay? You can listen to this, you can imagine, but at the end, she says, vote for Tierra Mack. So basically, she starts the camera, she gets on her head, and she literally like spreads her legs, spread eagle, and then twerks while she's doing kind of a headstand. Not a handstand, but a headstand. And the view is from her back when she's doing it. It's a close-up view. And this is what Rhode Island has come to. We have that clip, and here it is.
Vote Senator Mack.
What did she say about her butt? I mean, it was like, yeah. So someone's like commenting who's videotaping it saying, look at her, you know. And this individual who went to Brown University said she has an Ivy League degree and a state senator, and she hates to break it to you, but their decorum, whoever the they is, isn't for us. They can't respect us in a system designed to oppress us, says the woman, okay, who is saying you shouldn't judge her because she's a woman, and then basically doing something that is incredibly vulgar and ridiculous, and at the same time promoting curriculum for children that includes this kind of nonsense. And you wonder, ladies and gentlemen, where the bad teaching comes from. This is an important point, by the way. This is a really important point, because I see this as well in Maryland, in Annapolis, where as a state representative, as a state delegate in Maryland, which this Tierra Mack lady is a state senator in Rhode Island, I will see people put bills in, and they're trying to put into the curriculum by passing those bills really inappropriate stuff that your children are required to learn. Okay? And then you say to yourself, well, then why is it that parents are upset? Well, because parents, by and large, sadly, are very busy and they don't pay attention to what's happening in their state capitals. Okay. And it's understandable to a certain degree because they're really busy working. They're really busy raising a family. They're just trying to make ends meet. And then one day their kid brings home some sort of assignment regarding, transgenderism, as an example. And they're like, well, how did this get into the curriculum? How is this part of my child's education in, 5th grade? And the answer is simple, because some idiot in your state capital put a bill in to require it. And so whether teachers in your public school system like it or not, because it became state law when you weren't paying attention, now it's being taught because it is required. It's not a may, it is a must. It is a shall. And so you have people like Tierra Mack who get elected, and then they try to convince us that it's not only appropriate for them to twerk for votes. And by the way, if she wants to twerk for votes, she can. And if that's like getting her votes, that's up to her. Okay. It's not, I think, the best way to do it. I'm not really sure, as Chris said, when you see her upside down in her thong, what her platform is. And I use that term loosely, platform. We're not really sure what the platform is, but what we do know is that if you want to vote for her, you can. The question is, do we want that inside of our K-12 education system? And the answer is no, of course we don't. We don't want that there. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we're calling this podcast Democrats Twerking or Twerked. Well, that was Democrats twerking in Rhode Island. Now we have Democrats twerked, because the GOP, this is in the Daily Caller, GOP set to win massive majority in the House. Analysis finds Republicans are expected to take control of the House of Representatives with a potentially massive majority. According to Fox News Power Rankings, the GOP is predicted to win between 225 and 255 seats in the November midterm elections, according to the Fox News Power Rankings, which uses data such as historical trends, fundraising, and other polling to create projections for elections. Currently, there are 33 seats that the GOP will likely win, with another 30 seats considered as toss-ups come this November. Think about that. The GOP only needs like a handful, literally, like I think it's 5 or less seats to become a majority in the House of Representatives. They are already ahead in 33 seats, that a 33-seat pickup in the House of Representatives, with another 30 potential seats on top of that, ladies and gentlemen. So if you just look at the middle goal there, maybe it could be as many as, 50 to 63 seats, 50 being kind of likely. By the way, that doesn't even include the state legislatures, right? Think about the 50 states. You have state legislatures across America that are also having elections. So Republicans are going to pick up seats in state legislatures, which, by the way, is extremely important because the state legislatures are the closest to the people, all right, other than your county government. But the state legislatures can cause so much harm to a state and do so quickly, as you've seen already, by the way, in the blue states where, in New York, for example, it was a red state in the state legislature, and then it flipped to blue, and in a very short time, New York became a fundamentally unsafe and unlivable place because of taxes. Of course, it always had high taxes, granted, but high taxes, higher than ever, and also unsafe, basically unsafe communities, failing schools, just go on and on and on. So the state legislatures are important, just like the national legislature. So in the Daily Caller, one such seat that will flip in the House of Representatives is New York's 18th congressional district, which has a 65% chance of flipping red, according to 538. The district was once a Democratic stronghold, but with redistricting, Republican New York Assemblyman Colin Schmidt appears to win the seat with no problem. The issues at hand are economic and crime related, Schmidt told the Daily Caller News Foundation. Crime is affecting our community, and the economic issues are crushing us in the Hudson Valley. Roughly 56% of voters said that the economic state of the nation was the most essential issue to them this cycle, according to polling from Republican State Leadership Committee. The nation has seen a slight rightward shift with states such as Florida and minority groups like Hispanics becoming more right-leaning, exemplified by the election of Texas Republican Representative Mayra Flores. Oregon's 5th congressional district could see its first Republican member of Congress ever, according to 538. Republican Lori Chavez Ramirez is projected to cruise to victory against her leftist challenger. Other outlets, such as Real Clear Politics and 538, also predicted the GOP would win the House handily. So most of the prognosticators are saying the GOP is not going to just take over the House of Representatives and be the majority party, but it's going to be just a romp. I mean, they're going to crush Nancy Pelosi's party. Quote, Joe Biden's failed agenda has led to record high prices at the gas pump and grocery store and put every vulnerable Democrat's reelection efforts in jeopardy. National Republican Congressional Committee Communications Director Michael McAdams told the DCNF. The predictions by Fox News come at a time when President Biden's approval numbers hover around 33%, and Democrats are losing faith in his ability to win an election, according to a poll by the New York Times. So that's in the Daily Caller. So we started out with Democrats, trying to do these silly things to get elected, like twerking, twerking in Rhode Island. But we also have the Democrats just twerked because they are just getting crushed in the polls. And why are they getting crushed in the polls? Because their policies fundamentally do not work. we're living it. Okay. It's not just that we're seeing it on a daily basis. We're actually living it now. And when you live it, you realize no matter what your background is, Hispanic, Caucasian, Black, you actually realize, wow, this is not the way I actually think a country should be run. And I think it could be run a lot better. And my lifestyle and my standard of living is decreasing. Throughout American history, there's no better way for a party to lose power than to have the party in power cause the standard of living to decrease. Now, it's one thing, as you guys know out there in podcast land, for your standard of living to decrease because of some unknown event in world politics. For example, World War II, okay? In World War II, enormous sacrifices were required because the industrial complex in the United States had to start making military supplies and military hardware instead of stuff that you would buy at your local hardware store for your house. So your standard of living during the war was actually decreasing because you were making sacrifices for the war effort. That's different than today. Today, it's the policies themselves of your country that is actually making your standard of living lower. And I'm sure that pretty much everybody out there in podcast land gets it. But what's amazing to me, and I got to tell this story, is early voting has started in my home state of Maryland. It's now well underway. And this really never occurred to me until I showed up at one of the polling stations for early voting. And I drove up to early voting, parked my pickup truck, and yes, I have an F-150, parked my pickup truck, and I got out and I walked over to the Republican booth. The Republican booth, of course, is set up to help voters who may not know exactly who's on the ballot and what their options are. And there's additional information at the table about all of the candidates. So it's kind of like a shopping cart of people running on the Republican side, and you can kind of make your decision right there. But let's face it, most people, when they show up to the polls in early voting, already know how they're going to vote and who they're going to vote for. But there is a small percentage of people that don't know. So I got out of my truck and walked over to the Republican booth, and then I realized, oh my gosh, there is a Democrat booth too. As there should be. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, but who in their right mind would volunteer to work at a Democrat booth or tent at an early voting station anywhere in the United States right now? How could you even show your face? And that is what occurred to me. And that's really the funny story, because I'm looking at them and I'm like, what is it that they see that I don't see? Do they think that gas prices that are through the roof are okay? Do they think that electricity prices that are through the roof are okay? Do they think that food prices are okay? Do they think it's okay that you can't even get a lot of the things that you need to repair your house? What is it that they're actually proud of as a Democrat? What is it that causes them to work the Democrat booth as a volunteer and just stay there? And so I did what I always do. And this is the funny part of the story, is I walked over to the Democrat booth, as I always do, and I said, hey, everybody, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Okay, just trying to be gentlemanly and friendly. Okay, it just makes sense. Okay, and I know that there are those of you out there like, why would you do that? It's like, because part of the fun is to demonstrate to them that we are happy to be alive. We are happy with life. We believe in America, and therefore we just want to be friendly to them. So what do you think the response was when I said, hey guys, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Well, they all looked at me, and there were 3 of them, and 2 were women and 1 was a man. And they looked at me with the biggest frowns. It was just like, they didn't say anything. And so it was just like this massive, like, I hate you look. And here's the thing. I don't hate these people. Okay. This is what makes us different. I don't hate them. Do I want to defeat their beliefs at the polls? Do I believe they're fundamentally wrong? Yes, I know they're wrong, but I don't hate them. And that's what makes us different. They absolutely hate us. And it's remarkable to me that anyone would hate us just because of our party affiliation, right? Why would you hate someone because of their party affiliation? And so I decided, of course, I'm kind of stirring it up a little bit, but I was being nice. I was not being flippant, Chris. I said, hey guys, how are you? How is everything going? Happy voting day. That's what I said. Obviously it was early voting, but I said happy voting day. And I was being nice again, not flippant, not, in any way trying to get a rise from them. And then they once again gave me that look like, I just want to kill you. I hate you. And then finally, the one lady who just, looks angry beyond belief. And I've seen her before at the polling stations in past years, but she just looks angry beyond belief, looks over at me and she goes, hi. Like she doesn't even move her lips. It's like, hi. But that was it. I had to say this twice to them, though, to be able to get at least one person's reaction. And that is my observation, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that you have a similar observation out there in podcast land, namely that Democrats are angry. They're really angry. And they hate you. And you haven't done anything to them personally. And so why do they wish you harm? I mean, why can't they just continue their lives being happy and have just at least some sort of social graces and graciousness when you go and talk to them? And so I'm going to ask you to test yourself, okay? Test this theory that I have. Wear a hat or wear a sticker if you want. You choose which candidate and have it be a GOP candidate in your state, wherever you're voting. If you're voting early or if you're voting election day, whatever, which is a whole nother issue I'll talk about in a minute. But like whatever your candidate is, wear a sticker, okay, on your shirt. And it's obviously the folks in the Democrat tent will know that you're voting for that person because it is a GOP candidate for something. And then walk over to the Democrat tent, because this is common across the country. You have a Republican tent and a Democrat tent. I'm sure in California, they've got a progressive tent and a communist tent and a Marxist tent, although you don't need those anymore because the Democrat tent is the Marxist tent now. But walk over to the Democrat tent with your sticker of the GOP candidate that you are voting for on your shirt or your hat that has a GOP candidate on it, and say, hey guys, how you doing? It's nice to see you. Happy voting day. All right. But be really measured and nice and see what they say. Because I'll bet you the reaction that you get is one that is incredibly negative and angry, because all they will do is look at your sticker and that will make them hate you. And that's wrong, ladies and gentlemen. That's not the country we're supposed to be living in. We're supposed to be able to have conversations about issues, about candidates, and not hate the other person. And as Republicans, I can't emphasize this enough. It's so important as conservatives in the Republican Party that we maintain decorum, and that at the same time, we also take the high road and win arguments, policy arguments, through our intellect rather than just hate people. And I think generally speaking, we don't hate people. We love people. We love hanging around people. We wish they would be more on our side when it comes to policy decisions. We wish they would love their country. And I think so many Democrats hate their country. But we don't hate them. They, conversely, really genuinely hate us. And every single election cycle that I've been involved in, I have seen this, where I will go to those tents and they just are just pissed off. There's no other way of saying it. It's like, there he is. There's that guy. He's the conservative. Well, it's like, folks, it's okay to have a different opinion than you. What makes my different opinion enough for you to want to see me dead? I mean, it's like literally that's the look that they're giving you. And so try this out. try this little theory that I have out and see what happens. I think what you will find is that Democrats, as a general principle, have lost their mind. They really have. So get this, podcast listeners. Biden is buying cell phone data. Biden is buying cell phone data. What does that mean? Well, the Biden regime and feds are buying cell phone location data on millions of Americans through private brokers. The same type of data that was used by 2,000 Mules investigators is the same data the Biden regime and the federal government is buying, but they're buying it from private brokers. Big Brother, and this is in the Gateway Pundit, Big Brother just got a little bigger with the help of corporate America. A new bombshell report by the Electronic Freedom Foundation, EFF, has blown the lid off of the vast, secretive partnership between private companies and the federal government to surveil and track the movements of millions of people. According to the EFF, the Biden regime's alphabet agencies, including ICE, FBI, U.S. Secret Service, Homeland Security, Department of the Defense, as well as the state and local law enforcement agencies, are being funneled hordes of private cell phone location data by private brokers who harvest that information. This is the same tactic that Greg Phillips, Catherine Engelbrecht, and True the Vote used for their investigations into the mail-in ballot drop box fraud during the 2020 election. The cell phone location data collected by this group was used to identify the network of Democrat operatives who committed mass election fraud, as seen recently in that released documentary, 2,000 Mules. Using similar data and similar data brokers, the feds are now able to purchase millions of records en masse about the private location of law-abiding citizens, which surely is something that should amount to a serious violation of our privacy rights under the Fourth Amendment. However, many apps on mobile devices actively track and record a user's location all of the time, which the federal government takes full advantage of. Once a user allows an app access to their location, the company essentially has free rein to share the data with nearly no restrictions. Once it is harvested, the government comes along and buys the data in bulk and uses it in surveillance operations, according to the EFF report, which is the Electronic Freedom Foundation. Little is known about the specifics of how this data is being used. Some of the most prevalent sellers of this location data include Ventel, which is contracted to supply data to the IRS, the DHS, and its subsidiaries, ICE, CBP, DEA, FBI, which specializes in open source intelligence and is widely used by the military, intelligence agencies, private companies, and federal and state law enforcement. And Anomaly 6, which collects data via software development toolkits in more than 500 mobile apps and works closely with the government clients, including the Department of the Defense. So, ladies and gentlemen, the article continues and kind of goes on quite a bit. The issue and the takeaway from this article, and you certainly heard little bits and pieces of this kind of thing happening before. Why does the federal government need this information? Remember, this is the same federal government, certainly under the Biden administration, that has advocated, but privately behind the scenes, for vaccine passports. That is to say, you have to get a vaccination, and then after the vaccination, it has to be up to date, and then there's an electronic passport on your phone that you have to show in order to have freedom of movement in the United States, and then freedom of movement globally. And there are some countries in the world on this planet that have already done that. Certainly in Western Europe, the vaccine passport has been implemented or is being implemented, not in all of Europe, it's certainly many countries in Western Europe. And in the United States, you have a federal government that's basically saying there's no limit to the amount of surveillance that we can have on you But at the same time, you have the Biden administration saying, well, yeah, 2,000 mules wasn't true. So again, you should be concerned, and this is important, you should be just as concerned that 2,000 mules investigators were able to buy this private data and use it, just like you should be concerned about the federal government buying private cell phone location data and being able to use it. So for example, let's just say you go to the hospital once a week, right? You just do. And there's a reason that you do it. And the location data knows this. Okay. Well, if that information is shared, and it is shared amongst maybe private insurers, they now have this information in advance of you trying to switch insurance companies. And what do? They give you a really high rate because they know that you actually go to the hospital once a week. That's one kind of lame example, but there are millions of examples, right? I mean, where you go and what you do is up to you, and it's assumed that it's private. But ever since COVID, and I know that you all know this out there, but it's important to underscore this. Ever since COVID, there has been this trend towards trying to track people and trying to control their movement with special permission. And one such permission slip that you would need, kind of like the permission slip to go to the bathroom in public school. You say to the teacher, oh, do you have a slip? Well, here's a slip. I'm going to write that slip out, which means that the hall monitor will know that you're allowed to go there. Well, that's one thing, because those are minors, right? And they're under the care of the public school system. It's a lot different when you're an adult and you're in a free country and you're freely moving about, and the state is saying to you, you cannot move about unless we know exactly where you're moving. And we have the right to track where you are moving. Really kind of weird stuff. And I know that you all agree with that out there, but we have to understand that we don't want Republicans doing this, and we don't want Democrats doing this. And it used to be that you needed a FISA warrant to get this information, but because now the information is available from these private companies, the federal government is buying it. Well, isn't that circumventing the law? We have a security state that is literally out of control. And it's important that as conservatives, we understand that a federal government and a state government that turns into a surveillance state has to be stopped in its tracks. And we have to have stronger laws to stop not only corporate America from getting this data, but also from sharing the data without your consent. And from the federal government, we must also hold those individuals, especially in the security state and the deep state, from being able to collect this information and surveilling Americans for no reason and without cause. So next up, podcast listeners, a parent's mic was cut off during a school board meeting in Florida. No surprise there. And we're going to talk about that briefly, as well as some other public school stuff happening in America. So this Florida school board cut the father's mic off as he had denounced pornography that was happening in his kid's classroom. So a Florida father is speaking out after a school board cut off, and this is the New York Post, cut off his microphone as he denounced pornographic material in classrooms, claiming somebody failed drastically in the mission to protect young minds. Bruce Friedman, the Florida chapter president of No Left Turn in Education, which works to restore parental function in public education, was silenced during a June 30th Clay County School District Board meeting as he read from the book that he found at Fleming High School. So all he was doing was just pulling the book out and reading it, which is the same book that the students can read. And he's just basically saying, well, isn't this actually pornography? So he made a board as well, kind of like a whiteboard, if you will, and drew on it exactly what the book was talking about and talked about. And they shut him down, cut his mic off, because it's like, no, you can't talk like that here. We can only talk like that when you're not around to your children. And then in the Daily Caller, a mom threatens to sue the school for disciplining first graders over the comment, "Any life matters." Okay, this is a whole separate school and state where this happened. A California mother is suing an elementary school that allegedly coerced her daughter into publicly acknowledging and apologizing for writing "any life" next to the words "Black Lives Matter" in a drawing, according to an interview given exclusively to Red State. Chelsea Boyle claims that her 7-year-old daughter was punished for drawing a picture that included the words "any life" in front of "Black Lives Matter." According to an interview with Red State, Boyle alleges that the school did not inform her about the incident or subsequent punishment. She learned of the incident from a mutual friend. So can you imagine? Your child is given an assignment, and it's an assignment concerning indoctrination, right? Because any reasonable person would understand that all lives matter because, of course, in the United States, it's precisely the purpose of the Declaration, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But, of course, in a Marxist society, what you want to do is to separate people into categories and say, no, only this group of lives matter. So in California, they're all in on this nonsense. And this 7-year-old does nothing more than put in front of the term "Black Lives Matter" in a classroom assignment the words "all life." And she was disciplined. So Boyle's daughter, a first grader at Viejo Elementary School at the time of the incident, drew a picture that included black, brown, orange, and purple circles meant to symbolize her friends. A picture obtained by Red State and verified to the Daily Caller by Boyle's legal representation shows the 4 circles, the words "Black Lives Matter" and "any life." You know, it's pretty funny when you have a kid that's actually educated not to see color, and then they're taught in public school to see color. Right? It's like completely antithetical to MLK, right? It's just completely antithetical. And it shows you how blue states are going backwards. And you have to ask yourself the question, why are they going backwards? Why? Why are they doing this in public education, K to 12? Why are they trying to take us back to the 1960s and the 1950s? Why? It's only the blue states that are doing it, by the way. It's obvious why. It's the only way they can hold on to power, the Democrats. It is the only way. And we also have Trump's education secretary has a plan to stop woke brainwashing in schools. So parents need total transparency and access to their children's education if they wish to end indoctrination in the classroom, former Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos told the Daily Caller News Foundation in an exclusive interview. By the way, Betsy DeVos, former Secretary of Education under Donald Trump, the left hated her. They hated her for one primary reason, and that's because she believed in school choice. She believed in competition in schools. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I want competition in schools, so I want like a whole menu of schools to choose from based on the unique needs of each of my children, all of whom are different and may themselves end up going to different schools. Seems pretty reasonable to me. The left finds that awful. I mean, they hate you if you even talk about the idea of creating choice in education, of breaking up the monopoly. They hate it. So the K-12 education system is failing to adequately prepare students because classrooms are often focused on promoting left-wing ideas behind parents' backs, DeVos told the DCNF. To combat this, DeVos said Republicans and parents should work to promote educational freedom and curriculum transparency so parents can make informed decisions about their children's education. Quote, "There's been a move to ban CRT, wokeism, but banning it is not going to solve the problem because they will still find a way to get around whatever the ban is and reintroduce something under another name," DeVos told the DCNF. That's why curriculum transparency and really demanding full-on openness on what is going on in every child's classroom within a particular school or district, I think, is the one area in which some states have advanced legislation. Well, kind of makes perfect sense, right? it's also making perfect sense as to why the left hated her so much, because imagine in any civilized society, just imagine this for a moment. In any civilized society, what political party would actually advocate for parents to not know what the curriculum is? Like in any civilized society, why would a political party try to play hide the ball with curriculum and play hide the ball from parents over the curriculum? Well, that's happening. It's happening in blue states and it's happening in red states. In the red states where it's happening in many cases because Republicans aren't paying attention to what school boards are doing and what local governments are doing. I think they've awakened, which is a good thing. But in blue states, forget it. In blue states, it's done. There is no school choice. It's not going to change anytime soon. And so all they have left, the left, all they have is someone like Betsy DeVos to go after her and say, well, she's evil incarnate. She's just a really, really bad person. And we must find a way to just get rid of her. And, you know, because even if she's talking about school choice, that's just bad enough. And again, if you want a great way to describe why school choice and educational freedom matters to your friends out there in podcast land, just talk about the concept of monopoly. Monopoly is bad. Choice is good. For some reason, you know, we have all of these choices in the grocery store, and then we even have choices of grocery stores, right? I mean, I live in an area that's, you know, the population isn't massive at all. And I think we have like a dozen grocery stores within like a 10-mile radius, a dozen. And they're all competing against each other. Some cases they're selling the same thing. Other cases they're trying to differentiate themselves from what they're selling. Some cases they sell in bulk. In other cases, you know, you can buy smaller amounts. You have choices. That's a good thing. You have a menu of options. But monopolies are okay in public education. It just really floors me. But I think if we were able to talk about it that way in terms of why monopolies are bad and then segue into educational freedom, I think we'd get a lot more people to buy in. And so next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is transgender curriculum for prisoners. Just what you wanted with your tax dollars. Transgender curriculum for prisoners. The Biden administration funnels taxpayer dollars into programming curriculum for transgender inmates. The Department of Justice invested almost $1.5 million of your money into a transgender programming curriculum focused on transgender inmates' needs. The curriculum is designed to help transgender inmates with their gender identity, sexual health, and safety, according to a summary of the government contract. Though it's unclear if the curriculum has been implemented, the program could be available for up to 1,200 transgender inmates, according to Justice Department estimates. So you can't eat, but you can't afford food, you can't afford gas, can't afford to heat your house or cool your house. But not to worry, there is a program that has curriculum teaching you how to be a transgender in prisons of all places. The program helps inmates receive new identification documents and hormonal treatment. The statement of work for the program reads, gotta say that again. The program helps inmates receive new identification documents. Yeah, so by the way, what could go wrong there? You have a dude who's in prison because he murdered somebody, right? And with Democrats in charge now in the United States, they're letting these bad people out of prisons. So the dude, while in prison, gets hormonal treatments at taxpayer expense and then changes, you know, not necessarily into a woman, but looks more feminine, you know, wears a wig or grows their hair long, grows breasts because they take these hormonal treatments. It's still a dude. He's still a murderer. He gets out and now he's a woman murderer, right? Now he's a transgender murderer, if you will. So yeah, what could go wrong with that? Safe housing options within the prison will also be made available to transgender inmates. I am not buying that for a minute. Okay. I'm not buying that for a minute. Safe housing? Safe housing? What does that mean? What does that mean? Which, I mean, the assumption is that you're supposed to have safe housing to begin with. But if you're in a prison, my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but if you're in prison, you're in prison with all dudes, right? So are they saying, like, if you decide to transition into a transgender woman, that you might become very attractive to all the dudes?
So let's say you're a man who raped a woman.
Exactly. So I mean, there's nothing about this that's going to go well, of course, but more importantly is that principle, and it's a conservative principle, because so many people argue different parts of these kinds of programs rather than the most essential one, which is that's not what the purpose of taxpayer dollars are to be spent, right? Taxpayer dollars, as a conservative, aren't supposed to be spent for this. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. So the Washington Free Beacon first reported the existence of this contract last Sunday. As part of the program, inmates will seek employment through the assistance of institutional social workers. The statement of work says, transgender inmates will also be taught about discrimination laws that protect them when seeking employment. The Biden administration's investment comes amid reports of violence in prisons from transgender inmates. The Biden administration's investment comes amid reports of violence in prisons from the transgender inmates. Okay? Not to them, but from them. And meaning that the Biden administration's getting data that the transgender inmates are causing violence in prisons. But nonetheless, the Biden administration wants to double down and pay for more of this with your tax dollars. In April, a biological male inmate was sentenced to an additional 7 years for raping a female inmate. And this isn't funny. What I'm laughing about here is he's already in prison. And because of the fact that your tax dollars are being used to pay for these individuals to have sex change operations and hormone treatment and so forth, this biological male inmate got an additional 7 years on top of the sentence he was already serving for raping a female inmate in the women's section of a New York prison. Just like what Chris just said, right? Our producer, Christopher Hopkins, just said, well, how about if you're in prison for rape? Well, that actually just happened. A dude was in prison for rape, and this past April, he ended up being put into the women's section of the New York State prison and then raped a woman. Well, what did you expect? This is what being a Democrat is today. I'm sorry. It really is. It's like it's Dumb and Dumber. You know the movie Dumb and Dumber? How stupid can you be? Which is why we start out this podcast, certainly with the dumbest bill in America. On that particular segment, you have the dumb, because it really is. You have to be really, really stupid to think such a policy would actually be effective. And for what purpose? For what possible purpose? And then in the Epic Times, to underscore all of the problems we have in America and why we have so many people in prison, there is this story that says, fatherless homes linked to mental illness, mass shootings, author Warren Farrell said. And basically the article says, look, the reason why we have so many people in prison and the reason why we have so many people with mental illness and so many young men in particular in their 20s and so forth who are so angry who end up in prison is because they were raised in fatherless homes. So think about this. You might say, well, Mark, what does this have to do with the dumbest bill in America? Actually, everything. If you were raised in a fatherless home and you're angry because you didn't have a father in your life, because your father abandoned your mother, they were divorced, he didn't want to have anything to do with you. This happens all the time, by the way, in the United States of America. The kid grows up without a father figure. The kid's angry, okay? Commits a crime, a serious crime, ends up going to prison. The kid gets into prison, and then you have the Biden administration saying, well, you've got options here. We know that you're a dude, but now you can become a woman. So then you won't be so angry at your dad anymore. Or just flip that on its head and just think about a young woman. But let's face it. there are far more young men who are in prison. And many of those, according to, and this of course makes perfect sense, according to Warren Farrell of this article in the Epoch Times, he's saying fatherless homes are linked to mental illness directly, mass shootings, and we shouldn't be surprised why so many people are in prison when they don't have a father and the father figure. And then once again, they get into prison and the Biden administration's like, well, it's time to really have some fun now. We know that you weren't a dad. You didn't have a dad. We know that you're angry that you didn't have a dad. So why don't you become a mom? And of course, the Biden administration, through their transgender curriculum for prisoners, again, it's curriculum. The Biden administration is going to teach these prisoners that it's okay to be a woman and that they can actually get pregnant, because that's what the Democrats believe. They believe dudes can get pregnant when they transition. The Biden administration, it's not just they've lost their minds. They're the ones that have the mental health issue. The Democrat Party is so sick at the national level. And there are plenty of people in my own state, I will tell you this is true, who are Democrats who are equally sick because they do indeed believe that men, once they transition and become a transgender, can actually get pregnant. Just like Pete Buttigieg's husband had twins, right? Yeah, right. Sure. So we have a federal government that's decided that it's okay to use your taxpayer dollars to pay for curriculum for prisoners. And that is Transgender Curriculum for Prisoners, and that is the dumbest bill in America. That's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, True Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.